Hello, I'm Jabin with Regent Park TV. Today we're bringing you important coverage from Queen's Park, where community leaders, students, and education advocates gather to oppose the return of police in schools through a new provincial bill.
Bill 33 is about further funneling money into policing and taking money away from education and the well-being of students and school communities.
While Toronto police have said they do not plan to bring back the school resource officer program, the provincial government is moving ahead with legislation that could override local decisions. As students prepare to return to class this fall, advocates are calling on the province to invest in school counselors, mental health supports, and culturally safe learning environments instead of policing. This issue hits close to home in Regent Park and the downtown east, where students already face systemic barriers both inside and outside the classroom. Among the speakers was Toronto Centre MPP Kristyn Wong-Tam, who has been outspoken in opposing the bill.
I'm standing out of Queen's Park, right behind Queen's Park today, to specifically call on the government to not go forward with Bill 33. Bill 33 is a bill that will embed police operations in our publicly funded schools. We need our students' resource for success, which means that we should be hiring more educators, mental health supports, ECE workers, child and youth workers. We don't need cops in schools. That is not going to improve the education system. What we've seen from Doug Ford and his government is on the last day of school, of the school year, he had announced the takeover of 4 school boards, 2 of them specifically in Toronto. So now these 2 school boards, the Toronto District School Board and the Toronto Catholic District School Board, have been placed under government supervision. And the elected trustees have been stripped of their powers. They've taken away their cell phones, their emails, and parents and students are not permitted to contact and communicate with the school board trustees because they are no longer, in effect, elected officials. And so Ford did this unitarily. He did this without consultation, and he's actually done this without any justification or reason, because what he says is that he wants to place those school boards under fiscal supervision, but in fact, 71 out of 72 of these school boards across Ontario are running deficits, and they're running deficits because the Ford government has been chronically underfunding them since 2018, the year that they took power. All across Ontario, we have over $6 billion of lack of funding going to public schools. So the crisis that we see in our schools, the lack of supports for our students and families, is because of decision-making, poor decision-making by Doug Ford. Bill 3 was introduced by the Ford government on May the 29th. It has passed first reading. It's in the middle of the second reading debate before the House rose for the summer. We are calling on families, on students, on parents and grandparents, anyone and everyone in Ontario who cares about high-quality public education. We're calling on you to support the movement to kill Bill 33. Bill 33 will do nothing to address the crisis in education. It is going the absolute wrong way. It allows the government to have more power to take over more school boards, and to be quite honest, that is not the solution. But the solution that we are calling for is more supports for kids with exceptionalities. There's a lot of students who are on the spectrum with autism. They need additional supports embedded in those schools in order for them to be successful. We do not need cops walking and patrolling the hallways. We know that it's going to disproportionately harm Black, Indigenous, racialized students. That has always been the case. It is proven time and time through numerous studies. And at the end of the day, the government is not fixing the crumbling school system. We have seen violence in classrooms rise by 114%. So putting police officers and embedding the police force in schools is not the solution. The solution is more mental health support workers, more youth and child workers, more educators, fixing our crumbling schools, more specialty programs. That's what's going to improve education in Ontario.
Up next, we bring you highlights from the media conference, including powerful speeches from students and organizers calling for real change in Ontario's education system.
The purpose of today's conference is due to Bill 33, which is a proposed sweeping legislation. It is a power grab that ultimately mandates police in school programs, namely the School Resource Officer Program, the SRO program, and policing in schools across the province of Ontario.
My name is Cyrielle Geleka, and I am the chairperson of the Canadian Federation of Students Ontario. We are the oldest and largest student organization in the country, representing over 350,000 college and university students across the province. CFS Ontario is one of the many Ontario-based organizational partners of Policing Free Schools, and makes part of the provincial campaign for Policing Free Schools Ontario and the national campaign for Policing Free Schools Canada. Today, I'm standing before you alongside students, educators, and allies with the clear message: hands off our education. Bill 33 is the latest attempt of overreach from the Ford government, and it is students, educators, and communities across the province who are paying the price. Bill 33 is not about safety, it is not about transparency, and it is not about putting students first. It is about consolidating power, silencing dissent, and defunding our futures. It's about control. Control over how our communities organize, care, and build power together. This government is trying to pass sweeping legislation under the guise of oversight, all while bypassing meaningful consultation. This legislation is part of a continuum, a disturbing agenda that stretches from our youngest learners in elementary and secondary classrooms to the students fighting to stay in colleges and universities today. Students don't want nor need increased red tape. Bill 33 reintroduces police in schools under new names, despite clear evidence that policing does not make our schools safer. Police in schools have always been linked to harm, particularly for Black, Indigenous, and racialized students. What begins as surveillance in elementary hallways creates a pipeline that punishes students early and pushes them out of classrooms and into carceral systems. And that harm doesn't stop right after high school. It becomes a barrier to applying, enrolling, and succeeding in post-secondary education. The government has chosen to funnel millions into criminalizing our youth, while starving schools of the resources they desperately need. The government is writing fear into the law and punishment into policies. Students in Ontario continue to face the ramifications of a manufactured cost of living crisis. Food insecurity is on the rise, sexual violence centers are downsized and deprioritized, and international students continue to be exploited, all while tuition fees remain at an all-time high. And yet, the Ford government continues to push dangerous reforms that meddle with ancillary fees, the very funds a students vote on to support critical services. Bill 33 gambles with the very existence of services, running the risk of having these democratically voted lifelines cut by introducing unnecessary government oversight. These services are created to fill the intentional gaps on our campuses left by this provincial government. Ancillary fees don't make education expensive. Tuition fees do. The bill's language around merit-based admissions is a rollback of equity, diversity, inclusion, and anti-oppressive frameworks. It creates a false narrative that marginalized students are not admitted into post-secondary institutions based on merit, but we know that they are. This Trump-style attack signals a green light for white supremacy in admissions policies to prevail, and we will not let it stand. We've seen this before. Under the guise of accountability, the Ford government pushes for policies that slash funding and erode democratic processes. We fought them in court over the Student Choice Initiative in 2019 and again in 2021, and we won. Bill 33 comes back with a vengeance, dressed in new language, but guided by the same authoritarian goals, and we are ready to fight back. Bill 33 is yet another smokescreen meant to distract us from the chronic, intentional underfunding of education at all levels in this province. We firmly reject Bill 33 in its entirety, and we reject the attempt to divide students, workers, and communities in the face of growing repression. Any attempt to entrench top-down control over our public sector must be challenged. We demand meaningful investment into public services and public education at all levels, an end to the expansion of policing in schools, protection for the autonomy of our institutions, school boards, students, and student unions, and the immediate withdrawal of Bill 33, because the real threat to education is a government that pretends to care about it. Today, I'm standing before you alongside students, educators, and allies with a clear message: hands off our education, hands off our services, and hands off our future. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to speak today and for the powerful collective work you're doing to demand a policing-free future for Ontario schools. My name is Behan Farhadi. I'm a researcher who studies surveillance technology in public education. I'm also a former classroom teacher and a parent. When I dream of an education for my children and the children they share the world with, that does not include the presence of police. And I'm here today to state clearly, Bill 33 is not about supporting students or their safety. It's about control. It's about centralizing power, criminalizing students, and expanding fear-based responses into every corner of public education, from curriculum to classroom management to school governance. And it's doing so at a time when schools are already in crisis. This government, as was already cited, has underfunded schools by $6.3 billion since 2018. Students are sitting in overcrowded classrooms, mental health supports are scarce, repairs are a decade behind, and teachers and education workers are burning out. Children are falling through the cracks. And what is this government's response? More policing, more surveillance, more control. Shame. Earlier this year, I wrote about Ontario's $30 million investment in surveillance technology to monitor students. But these tools do not solve root causes. They are not evidence-based. They do not meaningfully address stress, trauma, disconnection. They punish students for symptoms of a system and society that is failing them. And Bill 33 doubles down on this logic. It mandates school boards to allow police access. It forces participation in police-run programs, even when communities don't want it. It overrides the democratic decisions of trustees, parents, educators, and students who have already said no to police. And let's be honest, these programs have never kept students safe. In fact, decades of research and student testimony show that schooling-based policing hurts our most vulnerable students. And that harm doesn't stop at school doors, and it follows students for life. If this government were serious about safety, it would fund care, not cops. It would invest in social workers, youth workers, counselors, restorative programs, transformational systems change. It would reduce class sizes and repair schools. And it would treat students like they matter, not like they're threats to be managed. What Bill 33 offers is a dangerous distraction. It expands state surveillance under the language of law and order. It sells the illusion of safety while making schools feel like prisons for the very students who need support most. So today I join others in demanding an end to policing. I urge all Ontarians to reject this legislation, and I call on every school board, every educator, every parent, every student to resist a system that surveils instead of supports, punishes instead of protects. Fund education, fund care, fund students, not surveillance, not police, not Bill 33.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raheem White. I'm entering grade 12 this September in Mississauga. And today actually marks the end of my term as the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board student trustee. I want to preface this conversation by saying there's not an anti-police bone in my body. I have family members both back home in Jamaica who are police officers and here in Canada, and I respect them. I'm going to dissect the conversation starting with the region I'm actually in, Peel Region. Just into the pandemic, the SRO program got scrapped, and similar decisions followed across Ontario, both before and after this decision, and for good reason. There's no question that the police have systemic problems. In fact, their own data paints this picture. When these police and school programs existed, there were numerous documented cases of discriminatory treatment towards marginalized students, and these weren't isolated incidents, they were patterns. The police, unfortunately, don't stop crime the majority of the time. They respond after the fact. They aren't mental health professionals. They aren't child and youth workers. The police cannot be everything to everyone. And quite frankly, our schools need more than they're equipped to offer. This past year, I was fortunate enough to be privy to the decision-making conversations by virtue of my role as student trustee. And there's no underscoring how the cuts to education and social services are being felt. If you ask me, that's what's pushing youth, young people towards crime. Not the lack of police, it's the lack of care and support. If a student wants to see a guidance counselor, book an appointment. Not to mention the fact our guidance counselors are forced to do more administrative work than actual guiding. Social workers and CYWs are at schools only a couple times a week. What happens when a child is in crisis? Should they wait 3 business days? I can't imagine walking in the hallway as a black male teenager just to see a police officer with their hand on their gun casually walking the halls. This isn't crime prevention, it's intimidation. The solution isn't more slogans. Protect Ontario, protect our schools, or whatever the buzzwords are this week. The solution is investment in education that actually cares about students. Stop playing politics and actually do what's right for young people. Say no to Bill 33.
Hello, everyone. I'm proud to say that we're now up to 55 unions at the OFL because we are growing. Because when we're united, we are stronger to be able to defeat. And I'm so thrilled to be in front of so many people today standing to push back. But I'm not here just as a labor leader. I'm here as a worker. I'm here as an education worker. I've walked the halls of our schools. I've supported students through crisis. I've witnessed firsthand the impact of chronic underfunding. I've experienced the burnout, and I have been a victim to the growing violence. And I've seen the harm by failed policies like school resource officers, the same programs that were removed because they targeted and they criminalized the very students that we must protect. Now Bill 33 wants to resurrect these failed programs. And I want to be clear, Bill 33 is a smokescreen. It's designed to distract you from the real crisis in education, understaffing, underfunding, and a government that refuses to invest in what actually keeps schools safe. Instead, they're recycling failed ideas, while chipping away at the oldest form of democracy in Ontario. Bill 33 seeks to tighten the muzzle on locally elected school boards and empowers those sitting in Queen's Park. It cuts out the very people who know what's really happening in our schools. Students, parents, and education workers from the community. The people that you and I elected, the trustees. Let's be honest, much like any of us, school board trustees aren't perfect. None of us are perfect. But there's a lot more work to be done to keep all of our elected officials accountable. But these trustees, they live and they work in our communities. They are what is important. They're one of the few ways that families and workers have any say in what happens inside of our schools. We need to work with trustees to recognize what the real intent is: a threatening of community voice and a hemming in of our freedoms. What this government wants is not accountability, it's your silence. And let's talk about what's actually happening in our schools. Yes, violence is rising. Students and education workers and teachers are scared. But instead of addressing the root causes, this government is offering what has never worked: more policing, more punishment, more top-down decisions made by people who have never worked in a classroom. There's no plan for more child and youth workers. There's no plan to hire more EAs or social workers or counselors. There's no investment in mental health. There's no real strategy for smaller class sizes or safer learning environments. This is a labor issue. Every time that this government underfunds education and pushes harmful policies, it's the workers who are left to pick up the pieces, and it's students who pay the price. And it's not just the OFL saying this. Education unions across this province have been sounding the alarm for years, calling for real investments, for real support and real safety, rooted in care and not criminalization. And we are proud to stand with all of them. We are proud to stand with Policing Free Schools campaign, with education unions, students, parents, grassroots organizers, as we demand that schools are safe because they are supported, not because they're policed. Bill 33 is not about supporting students or families or their communities. It's about silencing them. It's about undermining democracy. And it's about avoiding responsibility.
The bill entrenches the police force in our public schools. School boards will then be required to provide the police access to students, access to school facilities, and school programs. It gives unprecedented power to the Minister of Education to take over democratically elected school boards. And I want to just note that we have at least 2 school board trustees from the Toronto District School Board who are here today, Debbie King, as well as Dee Williams. I want to thank you for your hard work, your steadfast resistance to a government that has overreached time and time again. I'm also a parent of a 6-year-old who is attending a public school just 3 blocks away. And when I think about what my son needs for his education, I can tell you that it's not a cop with guns or pepper spray in school with restraints. What my son needs are smaller classrooms, more counselors. My son will need ECE support. My son will need to make sure that his educators are supported so they can deliver the very best to his classroom every single day, day in and day out. That's why I am here, not just as a shadow attorney general, but also as a concerned parent. Bill 33 is not supporting students. It ignores the voices of communities who have said they do not want the police force embedded in schools. The evidence is clear. Overwhelming decades of studies have shown that over-policing harms Black, Indigenous, racialized students, and it has lifelong implications. The Ford government is siphoning money away from classrooms. They're spending money on policing programs, technology surveillance, all in classrooms and the classroom environment. But at the same time, this government is allowing our schools to crumble. I visited facilities where the art room is closed, the science labs are closed, the greenhouses are closed, all at Jarvis Collegiate for years and years. They don't even have a cafeteria that is working. And yet, they're willing to spend more money on cops in classrooms that will not enhance the education environment. What we need are more supports for our students, and they have been crying out very loudly, and their parents have been crying out now for years, because it is not just one child that is impacted. A family of 4 will have to watch all 4 of their kids not get the quality of education that they deserve in Ontario, despite the fact that we have the finest educators anywhere in the world working here in Ontario. There are many stories that the media has steadfast been reporting. Stories around harm happening in our schools. We have seen the increase of violence in classrooms go up 114% since 2017. I'm just going to pull out one story. This story is about a 13-year-old autistic student. This student is in Whitby. He goes into this classroom and he is removed from the classroom and ushered into a windowless, small, secluded space where he is not provided access to education in a meaningful and impactful and effective way. Instead, he's pacing back and forth in this classroom, not even able to learn the alphabet. He's 13 years old. How is Bill 33 going to improve the life of Logan Moore, living in Whitby, when his parents have been begging this government to take action to embed the programs for kids with exceptionality that they actually need in order for their child to learn and be successful? Bill 33 is an attack on local democracy. We've seen Mr. Ford strip power from parents, students, and our trustees, duly elected. It allows the Minister of Education to now take over these school boards for any reason that he unilaterally deems of public interest. The trustees' ability to represent their communities will now be replaced with ministerial control, with very little accountability to anyone but themselves. It is a form of authoritarianism, now cloaked in the language of so-called accountability. Ford has now taken over 4 school boards in Ontario. But let me tell you and remind you and inform you that there are 72 school boards in Ontario, and 71 of them are running now deficits. Deficits that were imposed on the school boards because of chronic underfunding. Parents can't get answers from the school board trustees because they can't talk to them. He has stripped them of the tools of effective modern communication. You try going to work, not having a cell phone, not having a computer, not having access to your work email, and you tell me how you're supposed to do your job. That is what Ford has done to our school boards. And now parents can't talk to the superintendents who run these school boards either. And it is not going to be contained only in Toronto or Ottawa. This is coming across Ontario. This type of Trump-style politics has no place in Ontario. Centralizing power, suspending laws, only suits them. Those who are sitting in this pink palace in their cushy chairs. It silences community voices. We've seen this now with Bill 5 and the implementation of these special economic zones that override local government laws and bylaws. It actually exempts the government of Ontario from following the provincial laws. Bill 33 distracts from the real crisis, the crisis of chronic underfunding of public education. We have now heard time and time again that Ontario public schools are facing a $6.35 billion funding gap. $6.35 billion out of the classrooms, away from our students. Students in Ontario are facing a $1,500 deficit in funding supports and education, and boards are struggling. Instead of having a partner at Queen's Park who will pull up a chair and say, sit with me, let's fix this problem together, they are now punishing the school boards for not doing their dirty work by taking them over. Instead of investing in students, Ford is now silencing their voices with more carceral measures that are not based in any evidence whatsoever. To the contrary, the evidence has shown us that these measures of bringing cops into the classrooms, imposing policing and surveillance technology in schools is not going to work. And yet, this government is doubling down. As the official opposition, the Ontario NDP, we have tabled legislation and we propose the Emergency Safe Schools Plan that includes the solutions that parents and students are asking for, which includes mental health professionals, child and youth workers, and education assistants. That's what we need in our schools. We need prevention, not punishment. We need to set up our kids for success and not failures. And we should not be criminalizing after our own failed programs. In closing, Bill 33 is not about accountability, it's about control. Our schools deserve to be safe and well-funded. Our students deserve the highest, best quality education possible. We need to build the workforce of the future, and we're not going to do that by adding more cops. in classrooms. There's no place for police operations in the school when we have such big needs and the solutions are evidently there. This government is choosing not to implement, and they're choosing not to listen. The official opposition, Ontario NDP, will fight Bill 33 every step of the way. We know that this is not the solutions for our education system. There's no way we can support this. If this bill was embedded with funding supports, the resources for the kids with exceptionalities, then we would be all in supporting that program. That is not what's before us today. Bill 33 must be defeated. We will work with you to defeat that bill.
The Ontario Minister of Education, Paul Calandra, introduced in the provincial legislature Bill 33, titled Supporting Children and Students Act 2025. This proposed sweeping legislation, contrary to its name, has nothing to do with supporting students. Instead, Bill 33 has everything to do with further centralizing provincial government power, making it easier to take over school boards. Shame! And it is also about concentrating police power by way of enabling police decision-making authority over school board elected officials. Shame! And just as significant, it seeks to standardize police and policing as a normalized fundamental feature in schooling spaces through mandating police in school programs and policing in schools across the province. Shame. The proposed legislation of Bill 33 is a distraction from the real issue, which is that this government chooses to chronically underfund public education. $6.3 billion since 2018, and moves us closer to the decimation of the public education system, its privatization, and towards the elimination of school boards, along with the decimation of our public systems and common goods, including the deterioration of community-based supports. Meanwhile, the Doug Ford government has already chosen to funnel millions of dollars into harmful, non-evidence-based and fiscally irresponsible measures of police in schools, including police in school programs, such as, but not limited to, the SRO program, through the Ministry of Solicitor General's Community Safety and Policing Grant, and has been plummeting millions of dollars into technological surveillance in schooling spaces through the Ministry of Education. Rather than addressing the root causes, including addressing the social and structural determinants of health and equity, the Ford government continues to choose to siphon funds out of our schools, out of our communities, and pour tax dollars into policing and carceral measures, which are harmful and non-evidence-based. This has been the case despite the data and research being clear when it comes to the issue of police and policing in schools. They do not make educational spaces safer, and rather have harmful impacts on students, including detrimental impacts on educational outcomes, especially Black African diasporic, Indigenous, Black Afro-Indigenous, racialized, two-spirited LGBTQIA+, disabled, neurodivergent, undocumented students, and those with precarious immigration status, students impacted by poverty, and across intersecting identities. This is a systemic issue, and Ontario is not exempt. The Ford government knows full well that they cannot police their way into school safety, or police their way into student safety, or student academic achievement. Instead, they know that students' learning conditions are workers' working conditions. Woo! They know full well that what we need are properly funded, supported, and resourced schools, not policing in schools. The issue of policing in schools is not new to our province. Just over the last decade, Ontario has had the most locally based, community-led, and particularly youth and student-led campaign wins for the removal of police and school programs across so-called Canada. Through a concerted effort by Jane Finch Action Against Poverty, JFAP, Education Not Incarceration, Black Lives Matter Toronto, among many others, including an organization I was previously a director of, the first historical community-led win took place in 2017 at the Toronto District School Board, the largest school board in Canada. This happened after almost a decade of police in Toronto schools since 2008, with initial mobilizing and organizing against the police in school program, namely the SRO program, being carried out initially again by community members, educators, students, parents, and caregivers, including JFAP, the Neighborhood Organized Coalition Opposed to Police in Schools, No Cops, and Northern Secondary School students. Despite there being several Ontario-based school boards who have removed their police in school programs, across the province, there are school boards who have never had a police in school program in the first place, and there are those who have never removed their original police in school programs, or those who have opted for a harmful reformist reforms approach to a supposedly, quote unquote, renewed, revised, and reimagined police in school program. This gross negligence and human rights violation will ultimately exacerbate harms of school-based policing and entrench the school-prison nexus. The school-prison nexus provincially. We know that this is not a new provincial issue to the Ford government. For instance, in June of last year, former Ontario New Democratic Party MPP Jill Andrew tabled at the provincial legislature 2 of our Policing Free Schools provincial campaign paper petitions. One of our petitions called for the Ford government to mandate the removal of all and any types of police and policing in school programs across all educational spaces in the province of Ontario. However, 6 months after these petitions were tabled, Conservative MPP Jess Dixon, who is now the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Education, tabled motion 145 to have the Ministry of Education, at that time headed by MPP Jill Dunlop, encourage and support policing in school and policing in school programs. Shame. Almost an exact year later, after the Ford Ontario government was petitioned in the legislature to remove police and police in school programs from schooling and educational spaces and properly fund our schools, the current Minister of Education is seeking to mandate policing in schools through Bill 33. The Ford government is seeking to move forward with this even when it had previously supposedly committed to, quote unquote, advancing human rights and equity across the education system, end quote. Mandating policing in schools does the opposite. Shame. Bill 33 is not a surprise to us. It was solely a matter of time. This bill is in alignment with Ford's ongoing track record and fixation on colonial, carceral, cultural control, anchored by punishment, harm, and waste of tax dollars. We still, to this date, see the continuation of this on the heels of Bill 33. This government, the Ford government, launched a province-wide initiative in collaboration with multiple policing associations, launching a coordinated, quote-unquote, answer the call a public relations marketing campaign to increase policing across the province. Meanwhile, also announcing almost $200 million into increasing jail beds, while already working to significantly expand Ontario's jailing capacity through several infrastructure projects towards an Ontario prison expansion. Meanwhile, due to Bill 33, police associations will be seeking to increase their police budgets, whether it be at the municipal level or provincial level, in order to initiate and or maintain police and policing in schools. Bill 33 is about further funneling money into policing and carceral measures and taking money away from education and the well-being of students and school communities. Equitable access to education is a human right, and policing, including police and school programs, impedes this access. It is overdue for the Ford government and the Minister of Education to face the facts and truly support, through properly funding and resourcing schools, not policing in schools. This is a lawsuit in the making.
Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and visit us on all our social media platforms. Please visit our website for more information.